Welcome to China Manufacturing Decoded from Sofeast, the podcast where we take you through the major news and topics facing importers and manufacturers in China and Asia today. Hi listener, and welcome back to China Manufacturing Decoded. This is episode 80. Adrian from the team here, and I'm joined by our CEO, Renaud, as ever. Hi Renaud, how are you doing?
Hey, not bad. How about you?
Good, yeah, thanks. Good. Not enjoying the long, dark days now here in the UK, but that's the way of things in winter. But get me to a sunny beach somewhere. That'd be better.
Yeah, it's even getting a little bit cold, at least at night in South China. So you see.
Wow. A little bit cold, a little bit mild.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to be in t-shirts. That's what I mean.
Yeah, not jealous at all. Okay. Talking of China, I've noticed, at least in the media in here in the UK, that there has been some talk of quite a number of cases, and they're having some localized outbreaks of COVID in China. I think more in northern China than in the south, where Sofeast is based, of course. But is this translating to, restrictions which are affecting the China side of our operations, as well as, of course, all the power issues and things like that?
Nowhere near as the power cuts. Traveling, like moving people from one province to another, may be an issue. But that's so far that's the whole extent of it. Who knows? But it's you have a case somewhere, like I think it was last week. There was a case in Disneyland in Shanghai, and then
yes,
everybody who was going to the Pudong side of Shanghai, there were a lot of restrictions. And then if you came out of there and went into, Kunshan, Suzhou, some other like neighboring cities, they requested that you came out and mentioned it, and probably they would want to test you and things like that. And of course, it slows things down. But that, so far, cross fingers. That's the whole extent of it. But of course, China is always on the verge of having a serious outbreak, and they know it. That's why they're so strict, and they jump on it so fast, and they want to double test and triple test everybody just to make sure, So that's the way they do here. I mean, that's the situation, and so far it's been okay. Now, how long are they going to be able to maintain that? Who knows? But I think did you see the news about the building of these quarantine centers, or I don't know what they call it?
Yeah, they don't look very appetizing.
No,
as
right.
someone that has travelled to China reasonably regularly, that perhaps is in my future. And I must admit, I think I'd rather be in a hotel than in some sort of large, what do we call it, quarantine center? I'm trying not to use the word detention.
High security quarantine center. Yeah. So they're building a big one, 5,000 beds in Guangzhou, pretty much, near completion, I think. And they're also building one in Dongguan, one in Shenzhen. That's all I heard, but there might be a bunch of others in other places. So they're really planning to maintain, the lead on everything for a while. China is not going to be fully open for the foreseeable future. That's just the sad truth of it.
Well, the zero COVID approach, I mean, sitting here in the West, this is absolutely completely the opposite of how the approach has been in, Europe and the States, perhaps, but it's been a really good political success, hasn't it, in China?
Oh, the government used that as a proof of their competence. So, of course, now, and they kept saying, look at the US, how bad it is. Look at Europe. Look at, whatever, poorly managed countries. Look at Brazil. Look at Indonesia. Look at, we are a first-class country, So, and that's what makes it difficult for them to back out of it, of course. Now, it's like the the single child policy. For a long time, they kept saying, "Oh, this is good for us. It's good for us," and now they want women to have 3 kids if possible. But good luck to change the minds and the habits. Right? It's too late. It's going to be very hard.
I think 20 years ago, women would have had 3 children more happily. But these days, when a lot of Chinese women are, career driven, they're probably not going to be interested in that, are they? But we digress. I think the point is probably going to be difficult to go to China, and fingers crossed things do settle down a bit. Okay, so on to the topic of today's podcast, which is protecting product IP. In October 2021, we published a guide on Sofeast.com, which is called IP Protection in China when developing your new products. And you wrote this basically to give everybody a really thorough guide to all of the things that you want to do and to think about in order to protect your IP and some of the risks to IP. And it's those risks that I wanted to focus on today. So, what are the main risks to product IP, and how do we stop those? How do we identify and stop them? In the guide, there is a really good infographic which outlines the sources of risks. I will add that in the show notes. But to anybody that's purely audio, don't worry, we're going to go through it step by step. So when we talk about product risks, Renaud, which product IP risks, which products are most at risk, would you say?
The products that are most at risk, I think that's rather obvious. Those that are very visible on the internet and maybe in, supermarket shelves and things like that. But probably in the internet is even more visible, attracts attention much more now. That are very visible, that have, clear signs of success in the marketplace, that are not technically very challenging to reproduce, that they leave some room for profit, so that they're not priced very low. If possible, they're priced very high, and and they're not very big and bulky. They can be even sent, drop shipped directly from China, maybe. So this is the most tempting, for and here we're going to focus mostly on the risk of having a Chinese company actually reverse engineer your product, or maybe they're the one producing for you and they're going to sell it through some back channels, basically going in front of you on your market, right? Because that's really what people are afraid of. I mean, we work mostly with companies that develop their own products, and this topic just keeps coming all the time, and actually more and more often, just because there's so many examples of crazy China counterfeit or Chinese clones that are sold at half the price or sometimes much less than that. And people are really scared, and they hear all kinds of stories or maybe fantasies, and they and they're wondering what's really going on, what really are the risks. And that's why we wrote that. And we didn't write it from the perspective of lawyers. Well, even though we mention, of course, legal tools are important, it's not something you can really skip over.
Sure.
But more, on the business side, what exactly is likely to happen and why. And we try to break it down, as you said, with that graph, so people can see the different cases, because it's not all the same situation.
Absolutely. So let's say we have an innovative product and we're worried about protecting its IP because it could be easily copied and potentially copycats could even beat us to market. And then that's it. The business is completely blown out of the water. What are those main risks, would you say?
Right. So we broke it down in 4 situations. Think about it for audio listeners as a 2x2 table, let's say. And on one axis is, do you get copied early on or later? And early on could be even when you're still developing your product. For some reason, somebody get the information, reproduces it and beats it to the market. Or maybe they get on the market roughly at the same time as you, or very fast after you get to market, versus later. Because for many products, it takes time to build, the distribution channels, or to fine tune maybe the online advertising and so on. And that means success might not be immediate, but it might come, 6 months down the road or 2 months down the road, maybe on version 2 of the product because version 1 was not so good and so on, right? So on one side is, getting copied early versus late. And then on the other axis is, do you get copied by some actor inside of your supply chain? So people that basically, and that can see your project, your design, and let's say they get inspiration from it, and they believe that it's got a nice future, and they want to compete against you, right? Versus outside of your supply chain, being copied by people totally unrelated, who see your product is relatively successful and just think, hey, that's a neat idea. And look, it's low risk because we already see there's a market for it. And we already see these guys, how much they priced it and everything. Let's just, do something maybe a little bit different or maybe just the same. And let's put it out there and let's steal a part of their market, right? So there you go. So you have 4 basic situations.
Yeah. And you really can be a victim of your own success if you have an extremely popular product that's online. So it's definitely something to think about. If we look at these 4 scenarios, then let's focus on the early side of things. So who's likely to copy you early from within your supply chain, and what can we do to avoid this or to deter them from doing that?
Well, it can come from a number of places. Obviously, you work with a supplier. That supplier themselves, the company might think, hey, yeah, that's a neat product, but not sure I need these guys to, so they might work with, their cousin, or maybe directly with one of your competitors. Maybe you didn't know that they were working together, or they were, at least talking. And they say, well, look at this product, it's nice. Oh yeah, nice. I'd like to buy. And maybe your first order was going to be, 500 pieces, but that other customer has very established distribution channels. And then they say, well, yeah, I'd like to order 5,000, right? So what do you think is going to happen is very, very tempting. Plus, they might sell it at a higher price. They might actually pretend that it is their own product that they've developed themselves, and then they can reap a higher price. So it can be very tempting, and that's really, that risk is very high with ODM manufacturers. These suppliers that what we call original design manufacturers. Usually what people mean by ODM is that they have a showroom full of products, and they say, well, these are my products, okay? And they use that intellectual property to find various kinds of distributors, mostly, who will buy the products, maybe make some small changes, maybe put their logo on it, have a different packaging or something, and sell all of that. And for these people, if you come and you say, well, I want, to make that product, then they already, their business model is to to own the intellectual property and to sell like differentiated product. And they're usually specialized in a certain vertical, in a certain industry. And that means, of course, they have all the contacts to sell basically their product if they wanted. So in some cases, they will work with you to get to a final prototype that you approve, and then they will stop talking to you and they will sell it to somebody else. Okay, that's the worst case. And then there's all other kinds of cases with an OEM manufacturer, or they're also tempted, and maybe they supply to you, but they also maybe you're in the US and maybe they sell it into Australia, and then they didn't know, the Australian customers also sell in the US and Amazon, for example. Maybe they didn't even know, but it's coming back to bite you, of course. So there's all kinds of situations here, but it's the supplier, that's tempted to make a bunch of money, on your back by not respecting your intellectual property. And it's more likely if they do some of the engineering for free, right? So if you count on them to do some of the engineering design for free, if you count on them to maybe pay for the molds themselves and things like that, well, in the end, they believe it's their product. Whatever your agreements say, that's just a fact. You work with the Chinese supplier, they're going to think it's their product in that case. And they're not going to have any qualms, no hesitation whatsoever on moral grounds, right? They might have hesitations with, what are these guys going to do when they find out about it? That's what might scare them. That's it, right? So that's being copied early from within your supply chain by your supplier. Now,
yes.
It could be just an employee of that supplier who say, hey, this is really neat, and I get all the drawings and everything, and I'm going to set up my own shop, my own company, and I'm going to produce that with, a friend of mine who's going to produce it. That can happen too. It's maybe less likely, but it can happen, and it's really hard to prevent that, I have to say. It could be a sub-supplier, that's just going to provide maybe the one of the modules of the product. Maybe it's an electronic product. You need to have this one module, and then they also maybe write the firmware for it and things like that. They know all the functions, and it's really not that hard for them to make the rest of the product. So it could be tempting. It could be the tool makers. It could be the companies. Maybe, for example, one of our clients, they suspected maybe the company, because they make toy figurines. So usually for toy figurines, typical process is to have some little like mini figurines, not mini, but how to say, in clay. Actually, they tend to be larger, but some early prototypes, right, in clay, and then they work with a company that makes that for them, and then maybe these guys are using our early design and working hand in hand with another supplier that will make our products right away, right? So that these are the different sources of risk. Now, if you do everything in the US or in France, or this risk doesn't go to zero. If you do it in China, is the risk higher? Yeah, probably. But you don't start from a zero base here, right? I mean, this is not only in China, right? This is not only in China. There's a lot of cases where people just move jurisdictions, and then they know that they cannot be sued, and they do whatever they want. And that's in every country, even with the best ecosystems. That's the risk of working with people who get to know a little bit, more than you wish, and then they do these kinds of things. So one of the usual approaches, and more people have heard about that, is to compartmentalize the supply chain, to break the supply chain into different silos. But and often they want to do the assembly, in the UK, in the US. But then they look at the total risk. The problem is when you break everything down like this, it's fine up to a point, but you need to have a final, like probably the assembly supplier that knows everything, so they can test everything properly, and they orchestrate the supply chain over there on the ground, right? And they should usually be in the same country. If you start to do the assembly in another country, then you have some other risks that really go up a lot. You have some custom components, and they're made in China, made in Malaysia, wherever they are sent to, maybe to the US. You want to have assembly there, or to Mexico, and then you find out that, oh, this batch of 10,000 components, oh, we have a problem. We didn't catch that quality problem right there. Now, what do we do? Do we send it back? Then it's very costly in time and costly in money. So it's an exercise in balancing the risks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And loving that globalized supply chain. Unfortunately, it does throw up its own risks, doesn't it? If you're talking about those distances to be sending back defects and things like that. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. So with the treatment of IP by all these different actors, then I'm assuming that if we look at the legal tools as a way to mitigate any issues here, one of the best things you could be doing is to have a really solid product development or manufacturing agreement.
Well, first, before you disclose anything to anybody, make sure that they sign the proper type of non-disclosure agreement that is actually enforceable in their country, and that addresses not only non-disclosure but also non-use, non-circumvention, other typical topics, and make sure that when they share that with their own suppliers or wherever, they also get, these are the ones to sign the right kind of NDA again, and that they, and really, it's an exercise in narrowing down your options before you share too many files, because otherwise, you might get a better price if you do an RFQ with 20 or 30 potential suppliers, but you maximize also the risk of leakages. So again, you reduce one risk, or whatever, you optimize something, a part of your project, but then the other risks go up the roof. So try to minimize, the risk of leakage. Try to minimize the number of parties that get the sensitive information, right? And there's different ways to do that. Then once you start working with somebody, a product development agreement will clarify who's going to pay for what, who's going to own the intellectual property, any restrictions on where to manufacture and things like that, right? And then manufacturing agreement is after that more for the ongoing work, which again will cover some of the risks. The legal tools, don't skip them.
Yeah, good. Got it. Okay, great. So that was number 1 of 4. Number 2, we're still looking at early on. So who is likely to copy you early from outside of your supply chain, and what can be done? I'm thinking here, maybe if you've got a successful Kickstarter, for example.
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, Indiegogo and Kickstarter is great to raise some funding and to get some buzz on the marketplace. Sure, but this raises your risk exposure to being copied by clone shops somewhere in Shenzhen or Dongguan, right? And this, I see some companies that go on Indiegogo, they don't even have a fully working prototype yet, and they haven't done any reviews of manufacturability of their product, which means they might think they're just 2 months away from production, but actually they're maybe 6 months or maybe 1 year away from production, depending on the complexity of their product, right? And even on Kickstarter, where they must have a prototype and everything. I mean, we've seen some projects that have been, 1 year, 2 years late. There's a bunch of them actually. So if you, the thing is, there's a lot of Chinese companies looking at this. They look at it every day, and this is an up and coming project. Look at that. It's successful. Okay, let's based on all the photos and videos and everything, let's work on developing it at what they call Shenzhen speed. Really, really fast. And yeah, sometimes they get to market actually before the original product gets to market. And maybe it's an inferior product, but then what is amazing is that some of them, they have relays, in the US and probably also in Europe, but the big markets where they can go fast and get big is the US. So they focus a lot on it. They have, their relays, their contacts there for reaching out to the bloggers, sending them some samples to try, and to maybe the bloggers that first reviewed the original article and say, this is great. Oh, hey, you did a review on that one. Let me send you this one. It does pretty much the same thing and it's half the price. And these bloggers often will do the video and say, well, you know what? Yeah, it's a little bit, kind of feels a bit cheaper, but this is half the price. So there you go, right? So they know how to generate the buzz. They know how to get the same keywords in Amazon and other marketplaces. They know how to really position themselves in front of the original product, the real innovator. And if they're actually on, in production and delivering to the market before the original one, it's like, of course they get even more exposure. Oh, look at these guys on Kickstarter, but there's similar products already out there. Why do you wait for these guys who are already 6 months behind schedule? So yeah, companies have been burned by that. Some companies have been really burned. And this has nothing to do with where you make your product. That's what people don't really think about, but there's this case, and we did we mentioned it in one of our articles, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, the mousetrap, right? So you have this guy in Texas who makes, who designs a new kind of mousetrap that's pretty nice, pretty neat, works pretty well. Makes the molds there, injects the products there, assembles there, ships from there. And then this guy now sees that there are cheap competitors from China, and he's like, what, how come I haven't done anything in China? Yeah, but they saw your, the YouTube reviews and everything, and they could see that it was successful in the market, so they were interested, and it was not that complicated for them to reproduce. And now they're positioning themselves against you in every way they can with a lower price point. Ouch.
Yeah.
So that's something that will probably happen if you have a successful product with, that's visible and that gets noticed wherever you produce.
Yeah. So basically try and be as close to manufacturing as possible before going really big on the internet, I guess.
If you're afraid of that, yes, that's basically what I would suggest. Or there's different, then it gets to the business strategy, right? For example, one of our clients once told me, hey, and they make some really cool, kitchenware products. And they say, hey, we actually copy ourselves and we make a cheaper version, more simple. So there's the fancy design with the special materials and everything. And that one comes with a premium. But, if it's sold on Amazon and things like that, people are going to see that this is successful. There's going to be people going against it. And by the way, a lot of the time, it's not Chinese companies that take the initiative of that, right? Especially on Amazon. It's other, Europeans, Americans, Australians, whatever, who use software to see which products are selling well. They study the reviews to see how to make it a little bit different, to maybe make people happier or whatever, and then they go to a Chinese factory often and say, hey, we need to make it this like that, but a little bit different, more like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who actually takes the initiative of that? In these cases, I believe most of the time it's not a Chinese company, right? So again, the bad the bad news may come from China, and these other products, competing products, might be made in China, but it's not Chinese people actually going against you. It's maybe someone who lives in the same street as you, right?
Yes.
So there's a number of ways to go about it. You can maybe copy yourself with a cheaper product, more run off the mill, just to cut the grass under these people's feet. You can go ahead with a strategy of just of low price, high volume from the start, but then you probably need more financing. There's different ways.
But when you say copy, I mean, there's a bit of a difference between making a carbon copy of somebody's product, which is exactly the same product, and making a similar kind of product that is very similar, because, Apple made their AirPods, which are wireless Bluetooth earbuds, but they can't go and sue every single company that's bought out earbuds, because all the big tech companies have bought out earbuds and small ones as well. So, but they've essentially all copied each other.
Right. So, yeah, obviously, if there's a brand and then you counterfeit the brand and you pretend that it's an LV bag or a Gucci bag or something like that, or a Hermes, whatever, Omega watch and so on. Yeah, this is counterfeit. You reuse their trademark, and okay. Plus, it really looks the same. This is the worst. In most of these cases, it will not be counterfeit in the sense that they will not reuse the same name. And again, I'm not a lawyer, so I might use some terms here that are not exactly relevant, but
sure,
not appropriate, I should say. But they will most of the time what they do, because they don't really have much time, to try to make a great product, or really to get it as nice as the original product in terms of finishing and so on. They just go ahead with whatever material and processes they're familiar with, that are inexpensive, and that's it. So they don't really try to make it look exactly the same. They just try to make it easy for themselves, and keep costs down. So there's often differences, and if the material is not exactly the same, the finishing is not exactly the same, maybe the way it functions is not exactly the same but pretty similar, it's not that risky. Now, if the innovator has maybe a patent on the way it works, and then they really copy the way it works, well, then in the countries where that patent is in place, they might have trouble. The innovator can go after their distribution channels and get them delisted and things like that. But if it's sold from far away from China, hey, let's say from the US, are you going to sue a Chinese company in China to collect against them and things like that? Usually no. So the risk is rather low.
Yeah. Let's move on to the second type of risk, which is being copied later on in a product's life cycle. So your product's already on the market. Hopefully it's successful. People are taking notice though. So what about when you're copied later on from within your supply chain?
Well, what we've noticed in China is that when you start making a new product and you order 500 pieces, 1,000 pieces, they're like, there's so many products like out there that, that go with these small volumes and whatever. When you start to buy 5,000 pieces at a time, 8,000, 10,000, there's a lot more interest. What's this product? oh, there could be a lot of money made here. And not just suppliers, but sub-suppliers also. Oh, you order a lot of our, I don't know, camera modules or hinges or whatever, plastic parts, or what is it? They're a bit curious. Oh, there's something here. It's not bad. And for example, and that was maybe 6 months to 1 year ago, one of our clients has a pretty successful product, and we noticed that one of the component suppliers was kind of spied, or I don't know, there was another person unrelated, and we don't even know how they get the information about that product, but they were trying to get information about it, going to different, to a supplier that was making parts used in the assembly of that product. And we don't really know how it happened or what, but we get the information about it from that supplier, and we try to understand. And basically, it was an external guy who had probably his own little factory, or maybe it was a trading company trying, I don't know how we heard about it. The problem is people in China brag often and sometimes talk a lot too much, really too much. And he was trying to see maybe the brand, or, to see the full product, and try to maybe make the same one, or maybe try to propose his services to the end customer, or we don't know. But there's a lot of interest sometimes when they see that a product is really selling nicely, right? And so if maybe you work with a rogue manufacturer, maybe they will sell the same product through the back door because they see there's a big market. After a while, maybe you push them too much on pricing. Hey, maybe you drop them, but you could not recover the molds, right? Very, 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 very typical case. Maybe you paid for the molds, but you drop them, and they know that the relationship is over, and they're not giving you the molds, and you don't have the proper contract, and that's it. Basically, they have the molds, and you're very unhappy about it, but there's nothing you can do. Well, what are they going to do with these molds? And they know that your product is rather successful. Well, there's a risk right here. And if they've been supplying to you for a while, they might have a good idea of where you sell your products. And right there, big red flashing risk, right? And again, the risk is higher with ODM manufacturer. Same story as I said earlier. If you work with suppliers that have a business model of actually using intellectual property of products to sell, to get new customers and to sell to these customers, it's more likely that they will try to appropriate your intellectual property. So that's the risk of being copied later from within your supply chain.
Okay. And so to round it out then, the final one, which is being copied later from outside of your supply chain. Tell me about that, please.
So, and I covered some of that already, but let's say you over time, your product becomes more successful in the marketplace. You maybe you line up a few retail chains to sell your product. You find the way to sell it in e-commerce via, with Facebook ads or on Amazon or some other platforms like that. And after a while, people will notice. People will notice, oh, this is a nice product. It's selling well. And as I said, if it's sold on Amazon, there are software that actually will show what categories and what products are hot, are growing fast, are selling a lot without much competition, right? So they look at that and they say, well, there's a lot of money to be made here, and they want to go against you. That's, that's just the sad reality of it. And the trend is actually to have a multiplication of the same product. When one product sells well on Amazon, it's just crazy. It just multiplies. a lot of people notice, a lot of people come up with their own product, with their own flavor, everyone, and then it really dilutes the original product. So if you haven't really built a brand, if you don't have special access to certain types of users or customers, that's not easy to replicate. If your product doesn't have certain properties that are very hard for others to replicate, well, you might just be washed away by this ocean of, how to call them. They're not really copycats. They might all do it a little bit differently. This one's a little bit bigger, this one's a little bit lighter, this one has this extra function, this one has special colors, this one, whatever, is totally in recycled materials, this one, right? But all of this eats into your market share, right? And if you sell business to business, well, your main customer might just not care and just go around you. That would not be unheard of. It just happens, right? They say, well, why would I pay X for the products from these guys? And they haven't really innovated for some time. I don't really get great service from them, but I can get it for half of X, maybe if I go direct, or if I get another supplier to make it. And you don't always have very protective patents and things like that to fight against that. And by the way, talking about patents, having patents doesn't mean that you're really well protected. You should also have, well-written patents, and also have the budget for lawyers to defend your patents, right? So
that can be a big problem for hardware startups and entrepreneurs like that, can't it?
Right, definitely. And then you have as I say, the manufacturers, they see the marketplace and they want to, they say, oh, this is working. Even if it's been released, 3 years ago, hey, I can make it much cheaper, so I can make a good margin. This is always going to be there. And again, it's not just China, right? Where China is just amazing is how fast they will redevelop it, and how little care they give to IP protections, and maybe they're gonna sue us and things like that. They don't think about it. They just go ahead.
Yeah.
The risk comes from other sources as well.
Absolutely. Great. Well, that was a very, very detailed and interesting look at the main risks to your product's IP. And you've definitely given some good examples and also some guidance on how to, avoid or at least reduce the risks, which is good. However, if you're listening right now and you're thinking, wow, this was an excellent episode, you need to go and read that guide, because this is only sort of one chapter of the guide out of, I don't know, like about 10 chapters or something. So it goes into a lot more detail about everything that you need to be considering to protect that IP when you're developing and manufacturing new products in China. You can go to the website. It's under Learning Center and Resources in the menu. You can also check the show notes, and I will leave the link to the guide there. But yeah, thanks for that, Renaud. Before we go, good news. We have breached 10,000 downloads on the podcast. Can you believe it?
That's a lot, actually. That's a lot. Yes. Good news.
So to everybody listening, that's 10,000 downloads. Thank you. We appreciate you joining us on this journey.
Yeah, for people who've been listening for a while, please go to whatever software you use, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or whatever, and just give us a 5-star review. That it helps other people also find the podcast and gives us a little boost to the morale.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was thinking, to celebrate this milestone, our most popular episode ever was where we discussed the new product introduction process. So in the coming weeks, let's revisit that topic, shall we? And we'll put out another episode focused on MPI for everybody.
Yeah, great idea.
Okay, so that's it for now. Thanks for joining me, Renaud, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks. All right. Well, you'll hear from us next week as usual.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share because it will really help others discover us too.